Last November, the Associated Press reported that hate crimes rose to the highest level in more than a decade. The AP also reported that the United States recorded the most hate-related killings since the FBI began collecting data in the 1980s. Despite this finding, only about 14% of the agencies in the FBI hate crimes report indicated that hate crimes occurred in their jurisdictions. So here's the questions. What actions are you taking to make it easier for local agencies to collect and report this data to the FBI?
So I appreciate the question. As your question references, we do know that there is a phenomenon that I think is fairly widely accepted of underreporting of hate crimes. And so even though the number of hate crimes reported continues to grow, we don't know whether that means the number of hate crimes is growing or whether the number of reports of it is now starting to grow. We are trying to do a lot, and we do hundreds of these outreach, training, et cetera, of state and local law enforcement to help them understand better how to identify and report hate crimes. We also have a manual that we put out that helps explain better how to identify that. Of course, a lot of times the offenses that they're looking at under state and local laws don't necessarily come with a neat label that says this is a hate crime on it, and so that's part of the challenge. But we're working with them to try to improve awareness so that we can get better reporting on the subject.
Well, that's certainly appreciated. I want to ask about the threat of domestic terrorism by white supremacists. It isn't new, but it's gained a lot of attention within intelligence circles in recent years, and it's the biggest domestic terrorism threat, I understand. Last year, you testified before the House Homeland Security Committee that, quote, the most lethal of all domestic extremists since 2001 have been racially and ethnically motivated. Similarly, the former acting DHS secretary testified before the Senate that, quote, white supremacist extremists, from a lethality standpoint over the last 2 years, particularly when you look at 2018 and 19, are the most persistent and lethal threat when we talk about domestic extremists. Why is the threat of white supremacist terrorism so prevalent in this country?
I think that's some of that is a sociological question that I'm not sure that I'm really the right person to address. Certainly, as you say, it has been the biggest chunk of our racially motivated violent extremism cases, and itself the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism caseload overall. And the most lethality over the last decade has been from these same extremists. The things that drive these people, I think range. One of the things that we struggle with in particular is that more and more the ideologies, if you will, that are motivating some of these violent extremists are less and less coherent, less and less linear, less and less easy to kind of pin down.